Hello, and welcome back to What Now on the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. And I'm here in the studio with my friends and colleagues,
David Kennedy
and Red Keating.
and I'm Julie Brown. And we have a guest today, Kathryn Rhoden. Welcome, Kathryn.
You?
We are meeting the partner, spouse of a gentleman that we were able to meet back in early April of this year. It was Chris Rhoden, who was season 3, episode 16. It arrived on our platform on May 7th. So just for our listeners to reference that. So we were able to spend an hour with Chris. And little did we know, just a few weeks before his death. And it was a deeply meaningful and open-hearted conversation we had with him. And here we are now, about 5-6 months later, and we get to meet Kathryn, who has continued his blog. And as we were reading some of your own posts, Kathryn, we thought, what a wonderful experience to invite your voice into what it's like on the other side now of living in this world without Chris. So thank you so much for being willing to share this with us.
I will do my best. We'll see where I go. I tell people, if I have to describe grief, it's like Monty Python, the killer rabbit. I don't know if I may be dating myself a little bit, but, it's these medieval soldiers, knights. They approach this pasture where this bunny is, like soft, white, fluffy bunny. And one of the guys is warning the other guy, like, you do not want to get close to that bunny. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? And they cross the wall, they go after the bunny, and the bunny just goes for the jugular. And there's all this spouting blood but that's what grief is like. It's like you're just going along with your day and you just don't know what's going to knock you off your feet.
And that is such a great description, that it just changes our way of living in a way that, ambushes us. And yeah, so it is so great to have you here, Kathryn. And as Julie said, we had a chance to get to know Chris just very briefly. But I think in getting to know him, he impacted all of us. And I know our listeners too, and many have responded about how meaningful that was. But perhaps you could help us get to know Chris through your story. So why don't you tell us a bit about who Chris is and was in your life, and maybe we can start with that piece, and then we'll get to what this looks like around you. But let's start with a bit about your reflections on Chris.
I'm glad you got to meet him. I think most people are impacted by meeting Chris. He had the ability to make each individual person feel like they were the only person in his world. I've heard that time and time again. I feel like we had a very intense attachment relationship, even though it was short. We were together almost 6 years. When we met, he had lost his daughter 6 months prior and had ended his marriage during that time as well. That's a question that's come up for me in grief. Like, how did he move that quickly after 6 months? Because I'm about in month 5, and I can't even think about like starting a new relationship. He had lost his daughter to cancer the day before we were supposed to meet in person, because we met online. I found out I had cancer, and I was a mess. And so I told him, I said, I don't think I can meet. And he said, you know what? He was living in Norfolk. I was in Richmond, Virginia. He said, I'm going to drive up anyway. We were meeting at the art museum. He said, if you just need a friend, I'll be there. And so the next morning, this was on a Saturday, I got myself together and I said, okay. And I met him at the art museum. We never left the coffee shop. He said, are you hungry? I said, yes. And I kind of did a tour of Richmond. I took him to this French restaurant that was really popular. He said, I don't want it to end. And so I took him to a dessert restaurant after that. And the rest was history. I mean, just very intense. We say we met at the edge of language because we just exchanged words all the time. Deep thought, poetry, theology, philosophy. We sucked the marrow out of life together. And I've had several people say, man, you guys did so much. We were just so intentional. He was so intentional after losing his daughter. He didn't want to waste a minute of life. He taught me that. And so we approached life together in that way. And our mission statement when we got married was other people's lives will be better because we got married. And I think that we did that in a number of ways.
Wow.
So that's just a little bit. I mean, there's so much to say about him. I could go on and on. He's just such a good listener, so kind. He was brilliant, so curious, fun. I mean, he was just all the things. He was multitudes, you know?
Yeah.
You could feel that when we were talking with him and I just sort of wrote it down because I don't know how to say this on whatever edge of language I might be on, but that sense of living outside yourself. We hear people say, get over yourself. And it felt like, now you guys were able to get over yourselves, and it really felt like you lived in the joy and in the presence of others, even yourselves and others.
Mm.
And you got that sense when we were talking to Chris that he really did focus on who he was with.
Mm-hmm.
And when people feel that, it leaves a mark.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Like an expansiveness of being is what I think the word I would use to what it felt like to be in his presence. And that's the word that comes up when you speak about the intentionality of how the two of you lived your life together. It's like this really expansive way of moving through the world and inviting others into that too.
For sure.
See how Julie has all the good words?
Does that intensity, how does that impact the grief then? So you have this intensity that you just described in such an incredible depth. So how does that impact your grief?
That is a great question. I was just speaking to this actually to my therapist, to our therapist. We saw a therapist together probably the last 8 months. He was seeing somebody and he brought me in, and I'm so glad he did that because she was able to see and navigate, two of us together. But I told her the other day, the intensity has created such disparity. Like my highs are really high and my lows are really low. I don't have like a gray area. I mean, some days, but like I can have now even really joyful moments, but then it just drops so dramatically for me. And part of it is having that fun experience, and then you leave it and you come home. Part of the joy of those experiences are sharing it with your spouse, or a friend, but it's not the same. I mean, the spouse gets you, can fill in the gaps, knows the questions to ask, knows the relationships you've built. So it has created really extremities for me with the waves of grief.
And what, the spouse is always present. You don't have to go looking for them. They're there, right? You don't have to make an appointment to go for coffee to talk to them,
That's right.
right?
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that I have really noticed is how sensory the grief process is. I became a really good grief student. Like, I'm a very much, what's the why behind this? Not why did it happen? I left that long ago. But why am I responding in this way? Why do I feel so attached? I've listened to, you guys had Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor. I've listened to her. I've listened to podcasts. I've been reading all these things because it's helpful for me. But, understanding that the subconscious picks up on smells right after the passing, and it stays in the air. Like, I had a moment when all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I got to find something of his smell. He was a laundry freak. He wouldn't leave anything in the basket past 2 days. And, when he entered into hospice, I was doing a lot of laundry, because we needed to with hospital bed, accessories and that kind of stuff. And so I was like, do I have anything with his smell on it? And I ran to the closet. I started sniffing clothes. And I was just like, this is bizarre to me. And then when I heard, Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor speak about that, I was like, okay, that makes sense to me. But it's not even just smell. It's feel. Like, I would put the shirt on. I wanted to feel that. Hearing his voice. I play his phone, my phone, occasionally, just to hear his voice, along with seeing those things on the phone. Even taste. I found a special bottle of wine in our attic. It was old. And for my anniversary, I said, you know what? I'm going to pop this open. I don't know if it still tastes okay. And it was lovely, and just, it brought back memories of how we would share those moments. So
I think the thing, Kathryn, as I listen to you, is that all of what you have described, all of us have heard in our clients the very same thing. In fact, many times I have encouraged clients, look, they were afraid of losing a scent on a cloth. I said, well, why don't you take one and put it in a vacuum seal bag and keep it for, and then, another year from now, you still have that scent in there. Very normal. The feelings, putting on clothing, those are common pieces. And it's amazing how powerful those things are sensory in our grief, as you've pointed out.
And I think important to hear, because people will often sometimes go, as a result of doing this, am I crazy? Am I losing my mind? Is there something wrong with me? And I think when people hear again and again that is just normal behavior, that if you talk to enough people who are grieving, you will hear those kinds of stories again and again as very normal behavior in the grief process, because it is a sensory experience. Our life is a sensory experience.
Well, and I think that our senses so quickly and even subconsciously just kind of ricochet us back to, echo us back to memory. So Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me why it can then feel like so powerful, like the memory or the feeling of the memory and how it comes forward.
Hmm.
Kathryn, what has surprised you about your grief journey so far?
The biggest thing was before Chris passed, he kept telling me what to expect because he had been through it. And he kept saying, "You have it harder than me. You've got it harder than me." And I was like, "I got it. I can handle it. I've been through hard things." And when he passed, like almost immediately, it was like a new portal opened to me. It was like the Matrix. I had taken the blue pill and I've understood it then. I finally understood it. He could have kept telling me in his own language until you actually experience it, you can't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and people are so kind and they try to be there for you and there's a lot of grace. You know, we learned that during his diagnosis. You know, when people offer things, they're telling you more about them than what their words are actually saying, right? Um, so it is nothing against anybody else and their reactions, but it is a hard reality that unless you experience it, you don't get it.
Mm.
And so that was eye-opening for me.
What's some of the hardest right now? Because I know what's hard can sometimes change. What's feeling really hard right now, 5 months out?
Right now, the silence is super hard from the beginning until now. You know, you're with your thoughts all the time. And he was such a good teacher with me. I learned so much. I don't have the back and forth. Even with, you know, I have a good community system. I have great people. It's not the same. Nights are hard. Um, Mornings are hard. It's easy to fill up the days most of the time, unless you come unraveled. Church is super hard for me to go in person. That was, Sundays were very special for us. They were almost like date times. Um, there's a lot of coupling at church. You know, people are holding hands. It's funny, even before he passed, like I would get upset in church because the pastor who he was really close with, who did his funeral, I'd see him speaking and go, "Oh my gosh, he's going to be doing your funeral," you know? And he's like, "Well, do you want to go to another church?" I'm like, "We can't go to another church. It's our community." And of course, he's just so kind in that way. Um, but Sundays can be very hard because people are with families. We had a lot of like couple friends. I'm the third wheel now, you know?
Mhm.
So it's like anytime you have a great time, you're getting in the car by yourself and driving home.
Mhm.
Super hard.
Mhm.
And even though those friends want you to be there, they want to include you, there's just no getting around that truth, is there, in the moment? And feeling that truth, even if everybody's doing their most to be inclusive,
Yep.
well-intentioned, but that truth is always just kind of sitting right there.
Yep.
I think too, you're at, the 6 month period, and while there are no time definite pieces around grief, as you've discovered, I think in my experience anyway with grief, this is a period where it seems to get more difficult because the reality of the fact that this is permanent kind of sets in. I mean, early in grief, we know it, but we don't really feel it to the depth that it really is. And as time goes, and usually around this 5, 6 month period, it's that settling in as, oh my gosh, this is the way it's going to be kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That absence.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard, I mean, I'm more afraid of the second year. I've heard the second year is worse because you still have first like holidays. And even though they're hard, you're trying to make them memorable. You know, people are aware of that. So they're doing their due diligence to try and include you, or, you know what I mean? And so as time goes on, and I hope not, who's to say? But I can see the second year being more challenging
In a different way. You're
in a
right.
different way, in a different way. I'm kind of looking at the quarters of the year. Like I really leaned in hard to the summertime of memories. Like it started with my anniversary. I didn't want to be at home for my anniversary. That's a private holiday. You know, it's not like Valentine's Day where everybody knows about it. It's between you and your spouse, and you celebrate together. So I went to the beach because somebody had offered their condo, and my daughter went with me because she's a teacher and she was off for the summer. But it was a condo where Chris used to have a condo. And so we had visited all these places around. Well, I leaned into it. I went to those places. I remembered. I cried to my daughter through those things, and she was able to sit with me in that. And I think that was real healing for me. You know, I wasn't afraid of it. And so now that I've moved through summer and we vacationed somewhere that was near and dear to his heart, I camped with some friends. That was hard because that was early on. And the smell of the tent and the tent that we used to share, and thinking he'd be so proud of me that I'm like doing all this camping stuff on my own, you know, that was hard. But I'd just walk away from my friends, have a moment, and then come back. I have really good friends. They were able to just sit with it, you know, in it with me. Now that I'm into the fall, I think this season's going to be harder. It's darker, quicker at night. It's colder. I can't get outside as much. Holiday stuff is coming. I think January is going to be super hard. This is just, who can say? I'm just anticipating what's coming. Looking at the seasons and kind of treating each season. What can I do within that season for it to be meaningful? That has been a big caveat for me. Meaning. 6 Stage of Grief, finding meaning. I've read the book, everything I'm trying to like put meaning to. Somebody said, you can't solve grief. You can't. I think I'm trying a little bit.
And I think it makes sense that we try to solve it or fix it because there's so many other things in our life that when something goes wrong, feels bad, is distressing, we're kind of taught like, well, don't just sit there. Don't just, do something, right? Like this feeling like we need to problem solve or, put in a plan and work the plan. And, like there are a lot of things in our life. That's our instinct, is to move on it and do something. And grief is not one of those. So our natural instincts, I mean, there are things we can put into place that support us, but we can't fix it. We can't solve it. And I think that's often not instinctual for us to just be with it.
Yeah, I was thinking there, Kathryn, listening to your story and sort of the passing of the summer, is that it's not necessarily solving it, but it really does sound like you are inviting it and embracing it and allowing it to be and allowing yourself to experience it.
Yeah.
And I think if there's a solution to grief, that's probably it, which it isn't really a solution, but it is that sense of being open to it and allowing it to be. And already, I mean, you're anticipating that second year, you've just run the race and you've crossed that finish line, and someone takes you back to the beginning of the race and says, you got to run it again. And so I think all the things it sounds like that you're doing aren't necessarily solving the problem, because there isn't one to be solved, but it is inviting and embracing the reality of the absence of Chris in your life. And I mean, that takes courage, and that takes an openness to be vulnerable. And I think that sometimes we try to solve grief because we don't want to feel vulnerable. We don't want to be the third at the party, getting into their car and going home alone. But then that ends up, we end up just sort of trying to run from reality.
The solving of grief would be to have Chris back, I guess, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But we live with what does life, and I think, we talk a lot about that, of, that's the dividing point in so many ways, the way life was, and now the way life is, then the way life's going to be. And we don't know beyond today, but we exactly as you're demonstrating, we're thinking ahead, we're talking about what's it going to be like. In reality, we all know that's something that will come. And so the ability, and I've heard you say 2 or 3 times now, Kathryn, that whether it was your friends or your daughter, they just knew how to sit with me, how to be with me. And I think that is a wonderful gift when we talk about grief. Is we don't like being with it, but it's Alan Wolfelt that talks more about, over time that grief becomes less of an enemy and more of a companion, and that piece is a little less hurtful every day, even although the pain still will always be there. Just the intensity of that can change. No, it can come back in a hurry, as you know, but there is that movement towards a companioning of our grief in many ways. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? And I'm sort of backtracking here, but I remember Chris talking a lot about that love is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street, and he was talking that in context of his daughter and her cancer journey, and what he got from being a caregiver. He talked about caregiving and care receiving. I don't know if those are all the right words, but and he talked about the value and what he learned and what he gained from being there and having that time off with his daughter and to sort of companion her to the end of her life. Would you be able to speak about what it was like for you to be a caregiver to Chris?
Sure. He was so giving to me our whole time together. He poured into me. I had a very challenging first marriage, and he was the antithesis of that. And so when it got to be time for me to, not that it was reciprocal while we were married, but when it got close to I became the primary caregiver for him, I saw it as a gift of me being able to give that back to him. I really did. And I tried to do it to the best of my ability. I was very intentional about so many things. the last week before his passing, anybody who wanted to come see him, he passed away at home, they could come see him. And I can't tell you how moving those exchanges were. So much better than visitation at a funeral home, when they've already passed. He started sign languaging back to people when he couldn't speak. We were like, sign language? I mean, and it was always about the other person. I mean, he continued to the end, of loving people well. And I saw him also when it got closer to the end, even a few months at the end, he was trying to take care of me and take care of me and take care of me. He was having side conversations with people, guys that I know. Hey, you make sure you take care of her after I pass. He reached out to a ton of people to do his obituary because he had asked me to do it. And then he was feeling like, oh my gosh, this is going to be too much for her. So he started talking to people and they would come to me and I'm like, look, don't worry about it. I got it. I want to do it. But he just kept doing that. And so I just tried to love him as best as I could. I would still bring him coffee. He loved butter pecan ice cream. I made sure we had that. There was a painting that we had seen at church because they have artwork that you can purchase. And I said, you know what, we're going to have this in your room. And so I got somebody to get it because it was a place we had been to. Anything that was loving for him. I wanted him to feel that to the very end. And he was so sweet. He was so sweet. He wanted me by his side. And I don't know if that really answers your question. I tried to say yes to anything that he wanted. That was my philosophy the last 3 months. Whatever he wanted, I was going to say yes. I was going to say yes.
Right. Well, you certainly have painted the picture of love being the two-way street, that it's back and forth, that it isn't just all the caregiver giving and the receiver receiving, that it runs both ways, that love goes back and forth between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we talked about some of that in context of feeling like a burden. And I always say to people, I feel like a burden, and I say, well, you are a burden, but you are a burden. You are a burden that somebody who loves you is willing to accept.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other part. You've been a burden your entire life. It isn't. It's just to pass it along. But that sense of that's what it is. It is that back and forth. It's the good and the bad. It goes back and forth. And it's not just like a 1 minute conversation or conversation through the evening. It's a conversation that starts at the beginning of a relationship and doesn't stop until it ends. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's 6 years or 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end of a 6-year conversation,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And conversation, it's not a monologue.
That's right.
Yeah. And I don't know where to go from that, but those are the thoughts in my head as we were talking.
Well, it's beautiful, and I'm so I don't know what word, thankful to have this conversation because, most people, when they think about coming to the end of life, particularly if it's someone they love deeply, there's tremendous fear about what that's going to be like. Tremendous fear that often paralyzes that, and the relationship can focus so much on, fixing the disease that it misses what you have described about your caregiving and Chris's caregiving with his daughter. And that's what came through to me when he was talking about you in our podcast. He was so concerned about you and so, loving of you. And And I'm thinking that in listening to you today, Kathryn, thank you so much. But I, not that that can take away all the fear of what's coming, but I think you offer, and Chris offer, a sense of hope that while death is not something we choose to look forward to. It's part of our humanity. It's part of our journey. And the conversations that we need to have as we come to that point, just as you said, Red, it's a conversation, not a monologue. And you have shared that deeply by your experience with Chris and his journey and your journey. And so I think I know that it offers a sense of hope. And while we cannot change the outcome of death, we can choose what happens along that journey to the best of our abilities. And I've heard that in your comments today, that you have both chosen to do things well, to the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
And that flows through. So thank you.
Sure. Well, one thing we had time, the grieving process for me started way before his passing. It started with his diagnosis, knowing that it was coming. But because we knew it was coming, that helped us with the process to be able to talk through a lot of those things. I have a cousin, she just lost her husband in February, and he had a heart attack while riding his bike. She wasn't prepared for that. So there was some goodness in us being able to talk through some of those things. And how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your funeral to look like? And how do you want your treatment to go? He was about living well, not elongating the timeline. That was very important to him. And we had conversations about that. And something really, you talk about hope. We are strong faith believers. We're Christians. And for me, that has been my go-to during this process. And I feel like God has shown up for me in so many unique ways that I would not explain away. Now, I'd love to hear audibly some things, some direction. You get tired of making all the decisions yourself. But I don't see how people do it without it. Because once somebody passes, that just opens up more questions to me. You talk about thin places and this thin veil of passing. Like, it was really important to me that I would be there when he passed. A lot of the hospice people were like, oh, a lot of times they pass when the caregiver leaves the room. I was like, not on my watch. No. I said, I want to do the handoff to Jesus. This is important to me. And I got to do that. And so having that hopeful expectation of it doesn't stop when he drew his last breath. I get to see him someday again. That is comforting for me. I don't know if y'all talk about faith on your podcast, but that's part of who I am. So there you go.
Well, that's all right. Yeah. I think about it, the fact that he's been present through this entire conversation.
Have y'all talked about that? Like, I think there's a spiritual realm. Like what does that look like? I don't believe like the door just closes when they die and that's it. And there's no, because people think there are evil spirits around, right? Why can't there be other dimensions? We don't know all the dimensions. I don't know.
But I think this is we haven't specifically spoken to it, although we've certainly tried to invite some people, and so stay tuned. But, I will say in my work with folks, it always comes up because this is part of the grief journey, is exploring our beliefs about, it's kind of like it's the existential reckoning it throws us into, right? Like, not just the life of our person who has passed, but our life and what makes a meaningful life. And what do I believe? And maybe what do I believe now as a result of having this experience, that maybe this, because we're changed by being a caregiver. We're changed by death. We're changed by confronting our own mortality when we watch someone we love die. And so, of course, people have their own beliefs and what feels right for them. But of course, it needs to be part of the conversation because it's just a natural part of what we reckon with in grief and death.
Well, and you're a soul apart from just a body. Your real essence, your personality, who you say you are, that comes from deep within, your soul. It's not just what you do. And Julie, you say you're changed. I hope you are, but I don't think everybody changes from this experience. I don't think that everybody really wrestles with what is a meaningful life, what is my identity like now through this process? And I'll give you an example. I talked to a guy a few weeks ago. He lost his wife, and this was about 5 years ago. He thinks he did grief right. He knows grief. He did it right. And he's here to teach everybody how to do it right. And I'm listening to the things he's saying, and I'm like, are you for real?
Yeah.
Well, it's such a good point because maybe what I should qualify are the people that come and talk to me are the ones that are reckoning with this. You're absolutely right. There are people that bypass their grief experience.
We're all given the opportunity, whether we choose that or not.
Well said.
The word that I keep hearing too, Kathryn, and I think it came up with Chris, but the word that keeps coming to me through all of this is simply mystery. That there is a great deal of mystery, and that that's in my understanding of listening to you, that's where faith comes. Like it's not a matter of having to prove anything, but there's a sense of mystery in all of this, and that's part of our wrestling and part of our own coming to terms with what that is. And you're right, death does introduce that mystery in many, many ways. And it's important. It's an important process to work through. Yeah. I know when the three questions that I used to ask people when they were palliative, what do you think happens at death? Like, what do you think that moment is like? And then secondly, what do you think happens after death? Not that I know, but I'm interested in where are you at in that? And then the third question is, what do you need to do to prepare for your death? Because I think all of those things come into that idea of what you've talked about the mystery of it, our faith and hope. Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that we have bookended this conversation with Monty Python, starting with the that deadly rabbit and ending with the meaning of life. So we've gone from the Holy Grail to the meaning of life in about 45 minutes.
Chris would be pleased.
Well, it looped in. I think that's just a wonderful bookends. But I think what I remember, what comes out of me, or one of the memories I keep from Chris's conversation, and it comes in that sense of faith. If we are made in the image of God, and then we are God, and then you are God, and I love God, then I love you. And his whole hope that with the time that he had left is that when people came into his presence, they knew that they were loved.
Yes.
I think if, as he said, if we could keep doing that, the world would be a better place. And so I know you've come here in a state of grief, and we do appreciate the fact that we were able to have such a really rich conversation. And I think you should know you're beloved.
Aw, that sounds so Chris. I love that.
Well, he infiltrated us.
Yeah.
He imprinted
Yes, yeah.
on us.
I could get the holy hand grenade and blow the
Yeah.
whole thing up.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Oh,
Kathryn.
you're welcome.
Thank you for listening to What Now? On the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. What Now is produced in partnership with Hospice Peterborough, dedicated to providing compassionate care and support to individuals and families facing life-limiting illness and loss. What Now is recorded at Thin Spaces Studio in Peterborough, Ontario. Special thanks to Paradise Garage for providing the music. Technical support is provided by Sean Heichert and audio engineering by Kevin Fleming. More episodes of What Now are available for free on most major podcast platforms. If you found value in our conversations, please support us by following the show, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing it with your friends and loved ones. If you'd like to support the essential work of Hospice Peterborough, please consider visiting hospicepeterborough.org/donate. Your contribution helps us continue to provide vital care and support. Until next time, may you find peace and comfort on your journey.